Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Meghan Henry, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jen. Hey, Jen.
Hi, it's been a minute since we've done one of these.
Yes, I feel like we've been in like the summer podcast slowdown, which is okay. But yeah, it's been a bit. So happy to have you back.
And I'm happy to be here for this one. It's a little bit of a change of pace. While we do talk about claims, we have a new topic really that we dive into today.
I know. We talk, we get to talk about animals, right?
And who doesn't want to hear about dogs?
Yes. Well, my daughter, but other than that, everyone's on board. But yes, so today we are joined by Ali Swiatkowski. And, Ali is in the claims world, or kind of claims adjacent, I should say. But that's not really what we're here to talk about. We touch on it, but we kind of we veer off our Claims Never Sleep course slightly today. And I don't really want to spoil what it is, but she had a passion project and she dug in and did some amazing things. And I'm excited for her to share it. So with that, let's bring her in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good afternoon, Ali. Welcome to Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you, and I love your background. I'm inspired by it. Is that a virtual background or is that an actual?
It's actually a giant wall decal.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, this is like basically my personality on a wall. So this is inside my head.
And for those people who are listening and who are not watching us on YouTube, can you tell everybody what your background is?
It is. It's a series of cats and dogs, cartoon cats and dogs together that have a very nice kind of color theme, neutral color theme. And they're all very happy.
Yes, as they should be. Well, I love it. I love that it fits your personality. Well, and I'm going to dive in a little bit here, but so this is that you're in your home. So what room in your house is this? Is it like your office or?
Full disclosure, this was my office until my son was born. Mm-hmm. And this was already the mural that was up. And so it's fitting because my son is also an animal lover. So he has now inherited the mural, but it still makes a pretty cool background. So I use it when I have the chance.
Yeah. So, we're filming live from your son's bedroom.
Yes, that's right.
Love it.
It's funny. And I just thought of this despite the fact that I've been following you on LinkedIn and I've had exchange emails with you. My daughter, who has the same name as you, her name is Alice, but she goes by Ali, A-L-I. And she is my animal lover in my house too. So maybe it goes with the name.
Might be something to that. You never know.
She has a t-shirt and it says, "I like dogs, horses, and about 3 people."
I love that.
And it's true.
That's amazing. I have a mug that says, it's like I love pit bulls and about 3 people. That's my soft spot. So I get it. About 3 people. It sounds right. Yeah.
Well, for our listeners out there, a little foreshadowing. Allie's involved with animals, and we're gonna really dive into it. But there's also claims to talk about too, because we can't have someone on Claims Never Sleep without some claims discussion, right? But we definitely need to talk about the SPCA because it's such a huge passion project of yours, and you've just done incredible things. But before we get into that, you are a claims professional as well. So what was your path into claims?
So let's see, out of college, my first job was with a marketing and advertising agency in Philadelphia. So my undergrad was graphic design, and I went straight through and got my master's of business. So I started out with a marketing and advertising agency. From there, I started doing marketing consulting independently. Mm-hmm. And one of my clients ended up being an electronic restoration company that operates in this industry. So I started doing work for them, and they ended up offering me a position, which I accepted. And then I started to get involved with organizations like the Philadelphia Loss Conference. So that was kind of when I started to really become immersed in the industry and the people. I joined the board of directors for the Philadelphia Loss Conference. I actually then went over to workers' comp for a couple of years. I worked for a workers' comp consulting firm. And then I was attracted back to property, working for a forensic engineering firm that I was with for about 5 years. That firm was recently acquired by private equity. And that's when I sort of started to question my career path. I wouldn't say that it's good, bad, and indifferent, but for me personally, I like a more intimate culture. Our organization, the culture was very familial. I really felt like I could make a direct impact. And, I thought that just, it was very likely that would change, right? So I was also at an age where I was starting to think about how meaningful, I want to do something that's meaningful to me, and I've been volunteering with animal rescue and animal welfare for probably about 10 years. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'll like do a job in that area for like a year while I figure out what I want to do next. So my husband and I agreed that, we could afford for me to kind of take a step back, do something that aligned with my passion. And I did that for a year. And then I found myself right back, you can't escape insurance, it just pulls you back in. But I am now with a forensic engineering firm called Hudson International.
So tell us a little bit about your role with Hudson.
Sure. So my role with Hudson, my title is Strategic Growth Specialist. So
what does that mean?
I know, it's cool. So it's very exciting, actually. Previously, I was largely business development and marketing, with a hand in operations. I've always worked for organizations where, kind of involved in a little bit of everything. Now with Hudson, my role is a little bit of business development because obviously I bring relationships, but I am helping to position the organization for growth. Hudson has actually been around for decades. It's a multi-generational family-owned business, but there was a period of time where this business division wasn't particularly nurtured. So about 2.5 years ago, my boss, Bob Hudson, stepped into the leadership role, and he's kind of rebuilding and even redefining the organization. So he brought me in as, Bob is also an engineer. He's our principal engineer. So he is, he's a technical guy, he's understands all of the things that we have to offer, but he realized that, he could use some help on the business side of things. So that's where he brought me in, with my knowledge of how the business operates, right? So I am currently interviewing and vetting additional engineers and experts to add to our team. I'm reviewing our processes, our procedures, our client touch points. One of the most exciting things, we're about to launch a custom operational web application that I worked with a company to develop exactly what we needed. So rather than using something out of the box, I worked with this company to develop a custom platform, which is like super exciting. I can't wait for us to really dive in, but yeah. It's been a really great experience to take everything that I've learned, and I'm so grateful to my previous employer for that experience, because I'm taking all of the best, I guess, or at least from my perspective, all the best elements there, and implementing and utilizing them with the current company, with Hudson.
Well, so tell me this though. So you are kind of like claims adjacent, right? Like, but you work with the Hudson does forensic consulting, and I mean, we use forensic consultants all the time in the claims world. So, what is for you on your side, like how, and in your role, like how are you intertwined into the claims industry?
Well, that's a good question. So, well, and I can share with you, I'll use this as an opportunity to kind of share with how I've been advising our organization to move forward. It's very important to make sure that you have a regular stream of the typical type of work that's going to come in, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of that is structural losses, so you have roof damage, storm damage, structural impacts, all of that kind of stuff. And then obviously we are affected by weather events. But as long as we get that strong base of, the typical kind of structural work coming in, then we can move on to targeting some of the more complex things. And that would include working with like attorneys and things like that. So we have, we have engineers covering the main disciplines, structural, mechanical, electrical, and then we try to build relationships and plug in gaps for some very, very specific type experts that we might only utilize once a year or once every few years, right? That could be like one need that popped up before was a stained glass expert, right? Or someone that it's just so niche that, we help solve the problem of finding the right person or assigning the right person for a claim, right? I mean, and also because a lot of times experts are engineers, these are very technical minded people that it can be challenging, and it's not, not taking a knock at them by any means, but they are so technical that it's not always easy for them to break things down or explain them in layman's terms for the general person to understand. So that's why it's necessary for, firms like us where we do have in-house engineers, but we also do utilize consultants, but to be able to just provide the necessary information to move things along or to close out that claim, right? It's sometimes clients don't even know what kind of expert they need, right? They come to us and say, here's the situation. Here's the questions that we need answered. And then, they're depending on us to make sure that again, the right engineer or expert is assigned and that we provide, answers or causation, for the scenario.
Yeah, I'm often in that position. I feel like that you get a case and you're like, okay, this is what's going on. And I know I'm going to need someone, but I don't know exactly what it is that I need. And I find like it's such a resource to be like, okay, here's the case. This is what's going on. This is what I anticipate the arguments to be from the other side. Like, what actual expert do I need to fill in this gap? And I would love to be on this podcast and say, I know what the exact expert to use in every single file, but I'd be lying. Like, sometimes there's new circumstances you've never seen before. And you're like, okay, this is new. I know this requires some expertise that are above my head and I need someone. I just don't know who that is. So it is really important to have that partnership and like free flow of information to kind of figure out who is the best individual to fit that role.
Sometimes it's even important to take things into consideration, not only their technical expertise, but maybe even personality or how they work. Sometimes you just want to make sure you're not setting anybody up, for an awkward situation or, there's a lot of different personalities out there. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things is identifying the right person that is the right technical fit, but also the right fit that's going to, well, especially if, if there's a chance that it could go, that we might need a, testimony or,
So you
Drink
talked
break.
Yes. So you talked about how you like working in an intimate setting. So how large is this company? I mean, it's family owned. How many employees do they have?
So, another thing I should mention about Hudson is it's not only is it family owned, there's a family of businesses. There's the larger business focused on marine, and then Hudson International is our forensic business. And we currently have, I believe, 11 employees, and I believe we're about to hire our 12th. So we're growing.
As a small office that is growing, we're here. We feel you.
Yeah.
Small and mighty.
Well, and it's exciting to get in, early at the ground level. And I don't want to speak for my coworkers, but I think we all get this sense of that we're all invited to be part of forming the culture. We're we have some of these like leadership meetings where you really feel valued and you feel like what you have to say matters and it's being, considered. And I think that's really important. So I think, this is a great again, size. And even though this organization has been around for decades, the way we're operating right now, it's almost like we're a startup because we're kind of, like I said, rebuilding and kind of more of an infant stage, which I think is awesome. So,
well, and that because you get to design it, right? And you get to design how you want it to be structured and how it's run and your systems. And we've had a lot of folks on that are with kind of like startups, and all I hear is excitement from them, right? And it's like, I finally get to do this my way, and I get to take the good and the bad that I've learned throughout the years and kind of implement what I think works best, rather than coming into a system that's already in place and trying to work around it. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just an exciting opportunity.
For sure. And I can tell you too, it's really nice to come in and be able to make recommendations based on my experience, and have a boss that's very receptive and listens to me, versus having to try to talk him out of, like you said, it's a way they've always been doing things. Like there's nothing rigid about how we're operating right now. We're fluid. We're willing to take some missteps, because I think that's a necessary part, for a company in this stage. So it's really exciting.
And how did you find this job? Did they come to you? Did you see it posted online? It seems to be like such a perfect fit for you.
It was. So when I left my previous company, the other forensic firm that I was working for, and I went and I worked for a local county SPCA shelter for a year. My current boss, Bob, kind of just kept in touch and asked, hey, just seeing if there's any interest. And I said, thank you so much. I said, I feel like I'm kind of have a purpose here. I'm not sure what the future could, may hold, but, every few months he kind of, and then I got to a point where I thought, what, I might as well hear what he has to say. And I really didn't think that I was going to come back to the insurance industry, but the role that he presented to me checked so many boxes for things that, regardless of what kind of job I was going to take, those were things that were important to me and that I knew were of interest. So, it just seemed like such a perfect fit. And the other thing that really drew me to this company is how focused they are on core values and vision. I know there's a lot of organizations that will speak of these things, or they'll tell you about it when they interview you, and then you never hear about it again. We really have a strong focus on making sure that we're living these core values in our work every day, whether we're interact with our coworkers, our clients, whomever. And I've always thought that is so important. So it's refreshing. And I'm all in for something, like this.
Yeah. So let's pivot though, because you mentioned earlier, which is the perfect segue into the meat of this, that you were volunteering at or you were trying to find something that you're passionate about, and you're volunteering at a local SPCA. So tell us about that. How did you start to get involved with the SPCA? I'm going to butcher it the whole time. I don't know why.
Nope.
It's like
no worries.
Wendy has a wagon. I can't say it all.
So I mentioned previously, I've been involved with animal welfare for almost 10 years. I've been on the board of directors for an organization called Philadoptables now for, I guess it'll be 10 years next year. So that was how I kind of got my fill, got to scratch the itch. I also fostered a bunch of dogs in my home over the years. Again, when my previous employer was acquired by private equity, I kind of just took a step back, and I did a lot of soul searching, or what I would call like self-discovery. I was really trying to figure out what, if I could do anything, what would it be? And that is so hard to figure out. I know that, aside from being a mother, I think I've always felt that animals are part of my purpose. That's just always been, built in. And I just started looking for positions on jobs or opportunities, online. And I considered maybe going dog training, or I couldn't figure it out. So I thought, what? I came across this position online. I thought it was a humane educator for the local county SPCA. And I thought, what? I'll do that for a year. It'll be fun. It'll be, relaxing. It'll be rewarding. and that'll give me time to figure out what that next step is, in my career. So I applied for the position, and I got so hung up on it that I thought, oh man, they might think like I'm overqualified. So I wrote a letter, and I hand delivered it, and I decided like this is mine. It was already decided it was mine. And they ended up hiring me, and the role primarily was meant for me to go out into the community and talk to groups of people and children, talk about the humane treatment of animals, responsible pet care, spaying and neutering, all these kinds of things. And the other part of the role was to build a volunteer program. So when I started this position, it only took about 2 weeks for me to realize there were some things that were very wrong. This organization, I actually started to realize these things as I was building out the volunteer program, especially with dogs. I realized that there were dogs that were not getting walked. There were some dogs that hadn't been out of their kennels in weeks. There were some dogs that had never left their kennels. Yeah. So imagine an animal being kept and contained 24 hours a day constantly. That is not good for their behavior, their mental health. Then I started asking questions, gently making suggestions. The new girl, you don't want to come in and, act like
shake
you're
things up too much. Yeah.
Right. But it became quickly apparent to me that there was no interest in making changes, that they were perfectly fine with the way things were operating. The executive director, who was my boss, had been with that organization for 52 years. He was almost 80 years old.
52 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I at one point had asked him if we could meet weekly just to make sure I'm on track, if I have questions. He told me he didn't think that was necessary. Imagine, a boss saying that. So it was strange, especially, coming from, although my different background, but I have 20 years of professional experience, and, fully acknowledging every organization has its own type or degree of dysfunctionality. This place, they lacked the basic foundational structure that organizations should have. It just wasn't there. Also, unfortunately, they were just euthanizing animals without giving them a chance. There was no adoption program, no foster program, nothing in place to help these animals get out of the shelter. It was basically, this place was operating like a pound from the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
Which, present day, they're, especially in the Northeast, so many shelters have adopted modern sheltering practices, which would mean there's an approach for fear-free, where you try to eliminate all the factors that would, or as many factors as you can that would cause an animal to be stressed living in a shelter, because it is stressful. But there's a lot of things you can do to at least lessen, those stress levels. It's everything from the environment to how you handle the animals. Yeah. This organization, I found out they were approached by a national organization that offers free resources, training. They will even embed staff into your organization for up to 2 years, and they will pay for that. So totally free. They offered these resources to our organization, and the organization said no, and don't ever call us again.
What?
So this organization, again, they were choosing to operate this bare minimum. So once I realized that, going to leadership was not going to affect anything, I started talking to the board of directors. This organization is a private nonprofit. So the board of directors would be the next in line for me to speak to. It's funny, the president would never seemed to take me seriously. So I did eventually find another board member that it kind of seemed like this person had an idea of what was going on. I felt like this person listened to me. And then at one point, this person started to tell me, you are causing too much stress for me, and you need to stop contacting me, or I'm going to step down from the board.
What?
This was.
You are causing too much stress because you are finding what we need to improve and pushing to improve it. How dare you?
Exactly. And imagine, seeing these things every day. I don't have anyone to go to. I don't know what else to do with this information. I'm trying to do the right thing. And so at some point too, when you are surrounded by people like this, you start to question yourself. Like,
Right.
Is it
Yeah.
is it not as bad as I think it is? Like, am I overreacting?
Well, and sorry to interrupt, but I have a question though, because you would presume that anyone on this board or involved in the organization has an innate care for animals. So wouldn't it, like, one, why would you get involved in said organization if you didn't care about the well-being of animals? But then two, like, then what are you doing? Like,
Right.
like, and they don't have a voice, like it is really up to the humans to make
Exactly.
sure that they are okay, or you're doing the best that you possibly can for them.
100% agree. I mean, there is something called compassion fatigue that, a lot of animal welfare individuals, may face. And that's where you're just so run down that you don't feel anymore. You don't feel that anymore. With these individuals at this organization, I didn't know them before to say whether that's what happened. I tend to think, with the executive director, who was there for so long, I think there was a lot of I think he was still retaining that 80s and 90s pound mentality, and he kind of instilled that into his management team.
Right.
And so, his management team also it was two individuals that he hired right out of high school who were in their late 50s. So this was the only job they've ever had.
Yeah.
They had no training. The staff didn't even have, until recently, the staff didn't even get animal handling training. So that's dangerous. They just flying by the seat of their pants, collecting their paychecks. And the executive director was also making $250,000.
Ah!
Forgot to mention that part.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's that. If you're wondering why he hung in there that long,
That's why.
Yes. So eventually, I felt like I tried to handle things the way you're supposed to. Oh, additionally, the whistleblower policy said if you had an issue, you go to the executive director or the president of the board, which I did both. Both continued to gaslight me, tried to discredit me. I mean, there were situations where, people tried to throw me under the bus. It was a very strange scenario. So eventually, when I realized I was just hitting the wall, that's when I connected with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Investigative journalist he did a wonderful job. He interviewed myself, some other employees anonymously because nobody wanted to experience any kind of backlash or retaliation. Some of the volunteers and this journalist did some of his own research and he found out some pretty interesting things. One of which this particular SPCA, which is very run down, had $67 million in assets.
What?
The majority of those funds come from people leaving money in their will to the organization. And of course, they're anticipating that those funds will be utilized for the animals or the facility. Well, the board of directors was investing in investment funds. And the treasurer of the board previously worked for a firm where half of those funds were invested. So there's just some questionable practices happening here. It's that's not illegal, but that looks bad,
Right.
But and then the other thing I should mention is that for private nonprofits, I believe the requirement is a minimum of 5% of net assets have to be spent on operational costs. They were hitting like to the decimal almost. That is exactly what their annual spend was. So it would appear that they were very intentional with spending the smallest amount possible.
Right.
So
what happened after the article came out in the Philly Inquirer?
So the article came out in September of 2024. 2 days before the article, our medical director resigned because he knew his name was going to be in that article. 2 weeks after the article, the executive director retired. And a month later, the president of the board resigned, and she actually told another employee that the reason she didn't announce her resignation was because she didn't want me to revel in it. That's the president of the board, who I tried to express my concerns to. I mean, that I couldn't believe she said that. I mean, that was, but at the same time, well, then I'm glad that she stepped down, because that is not a leader. And that's clearly someone that had no interest in making this a better organization. Another month, the leadership team was terminated. And over time, they have been replacing, the board of directors have been replaced with new people that some of them are involved in animal rescue, some of them, and I think a board of directors, it should be diverse. So they have people, some people that, work in PRs, attorneys, a good mix of professionals that are, working on, restructuring, rebuilding, and rebuilding trust with the community, because the community was pissed.
Yeah.
This was happening right under their noses. They had no idea. The other thing, a lot of people think that SPCA is one large organization and that they're all connected. SPCA is actually not an organization. SPCA is a generic term, just like animal rescue. So they're not connected. And so there is not a larger SPCA parent company that holds all of these individual organizations accountable. And I think that's where people hadn't made an assumption. But no, this was a private organization that was doing these things and hiding behind a nonprofit organization to invest money for who knows what. I honestly don't know. The other thing, I believe it's still open, but the Attorney General opened an investigation. Mm-hmm. And I, as far as I know, that's still ongoing. My gut tells me there's something there, but I mean, only time will tell.
It's crazy to me that you are the first person to raise these concerns. I mean, I'm in the northeast part of the state and we have an animal shelter here, and people do nothing but complain about the animal shelter. And you're doing this wrong. And I don't know the inner workings, but it appears that they're doing the best that they can with what they have, right? Because animal shelters in general are overflowing. People aren't adopting. I mean, it's just, it's difficult. It must be such a difficult industry to be in, or area to be in. But I'm just like, the people in our community will go up there and volunteer and walk the dogs and do everything. And you know what I mean? Like, everyone's talking about what's going on. So the fact that you're the first person, and this leader was in his 80s, so 60 years of people have been going there, that nobody said anything is just like mind blowing.
Well, I do have a theory on this. Unfortunately, nonprofit work, especially this, unless you're at the top, an executive where you're making $250,000, generally does not pay well. A lot of people that work there, a lot of them do love animals, but a lot of them also need a job, right? And the pay rate is just not great. So a lot of people I find, especially the people that the animal care technicians and stuff, the people that are working the kennels, cleaning, feeding, working with the animals, I think they either figure out their own coping mechanisms in that organization, or they would just leave because they couldn't handle it. Because there was, again, the gaslighting. This was systemic. Okay, this wasn't just like, oh, I see that's wrong. This place was just, there was no structure, there was no hierarchy. It was just, it's hard to even put into words, but new people would come in, they'd either sink or swim. And again, swimming meant just developing your own coping mechanism. But I think the difference for me is I didn't need this job. I took this job as a passion project. So I didn't have anything to lose. You know what I mean?
Right. But you found some passion.
Oh man, I'll tell you this again, I joking not when I literally said, you know what, this will be a light, fun job I'll do for a year. This was the darkest year of my life. I have never, that is the most traumatic experience of my life. I would cry every day driving to and from work. Like, it was devastating, and I had to become, I feel like an undercover agent, and I was logging things. I was, notating everything that I was experiencing, as if I would potentially go to court. In
my head, I'm picturing you as like Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah.
Right. I just dressed a little more conservative.
So, and what did your husband have to say about all this? I mean, because the two of you sat down and like made this decision together, and then
He was so
I got this giant expose happening right now.
Oh my God, I know. He was so supportive of the move initially, which is wonderful. And that's why, I love him. You're like, yes, you should do that, until you figure it out. But a couple months in, he was actually asking me if I would leave because it consumed my life. It was all I thought about. I struggled to be present when I was home with my husband and my son. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. It was the biggest challenge of my life. Because I love animals. Like I said, that's part of my purpose. So and the weird part is I felt the most uncomfortable when I wasn't there. It's funny. We're going on vacation to the beach next week. I remember last year when we went to the beach, I couldn't relax. I felt sick to my stomach because I wasn't there to keep an eye on things. I was afraid that I'd come back and certain animals would be gone.
Yeah.
And just swept under the rug. It was like, but that was how this organization operated. And you didn't, showing emotion there was showing weakness. This is a type of organization where we should be able to embrace each other and comfort each other because sometimes difficult decisions do have to be made. Sometimes euthanasia is necessary. Mm-hmm. But in this organization, it was just, if an animal was considered like an inconvenience, or they just didn't want to deal with it, or especially large breed dogs and pit bulls, mm-hmm. They wouldn't even, there wasn't even, at that time, there was not even somebody that would come in and give them a behavioral evaluation. There was no trainers. There was no people professionally trained to work with dogs that were working in that organization.
That's
which is bizarre. They have since hired, I think, 2 part-time trainers. So that's great. There's things happening in the right direction. It's definitely that the ship is steering.
So I just heard you say that you're going to the beach, which is very unusual for somebody from Philadelphia, that you're not going to the shore.
I was like, where are you going here with this, Jen? But now I hear you.
You know what? I think I interchange, I do say home, but,
I did pick up
but
on
like
that.
Sometimes I say water, sometimes I say water. So I don't know. My dad's from the Poconos. My mom's from the city. So maybe I just
grab a
combination of the two.
I mean, but is it the Jersey Shore, or are you going to
It is the Jersey Shore. Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier about this year that you took, and you wanted to try to find like something meaningful and find kind of like meaning in your life. And now kind of looking back on it, how do you think that, I think we all kind of get to that certain point when you're in your life and you're having children, or you just kind of reach that age where you're like, is this it? Like, am I finding enough meaning in my work, or what else can I or should I be doing? And like, how did you kind of reckon with all of that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, our son, he's 3. And like I said, I used to foster dogs all the time. So we took a break from that because we also have 2 dogs. Yeah. So when we had our son, took a break from fostering, and that kind of felt like a little bit of a void because I felt like that was always a way I could help these individual dogs. What was accomplished at this shelter helped so many animals. Like it was, I hoped so hard that what I was doing and what I was going through wouldn't be in vain, and that it would create change, because it was just, sometimes I feel like I still have like trauma, from the experience. But I now feel like this was supposed to happen. I was meant to land there in order to help create change or be the catalyst of change. And, I don't think I was meant to be there and then start a new career path, but I was meant to go in there and serve a purpose and I guess leave. And so, again, I think aside from being a mom, that I would also say this is one of my proudest accomplishments.
As it should be. It's pretty amazing what you did.
Mm-hmm. So, but tell us a little bit about, because you were saying, you touched on earlier about like some of the animals, like they didn't ever get walked, and so I'm not super familiar with shelters other than I've been in them, but like if someone's out there going to an animal shelter and looking to adopt, like what sort of conditions are you looking for to be like, okay, this is a good shelter, they are taking good care of these animals versus what you were seeing there at the time?
Sure, that's a really good question. So again, there is an approach called fear-free training, and so our organization actually received the Pennsylvania SPCA, which is in Philadelphia, actually came in and did some consulting for our organization because we needed help. We needed people to come in and show us how to be safe around animals, how to properly handle animals, how to make sure it's a clean environment, a healthy environment. So what the things that are important for a shelter is to have an environment where the animals, not only are they in a clean and safe environment, but they're provided with something that we call enrichment. So enrichment would be anything that affects like your senses, right? So for dogs, it could be like, rubber Kongs, the big rubber Kongs that you could stuff like peanut butter and stuff, freezing them or giving them treats or taking them, for a walk or taking them out to the play yard and working on, sit and command. So it's things that are kind of, they're engaging them, keeping them sane, because no animal, cat or dog, the shelter is just not a pleasant environment, and they are contained the majority of their stay there, which, for some it's days, for some it's months. So it's really important for them to be, get time out of their, for the dogs, get time out of their kennel, get that interaction and playtime, have an opportunity to be a dog or be a cat. And actually now that's the best way to describe it is the best environments give the animals the space to do dog things and cat things. Right. And I think talking to the staff, when you talk to staff, you can tell how much they care or how much they're engaged with the animals too. And it is unfortunate because there's a lot of organizations that are running on minimal funding, so, but you always want to make sure you know who you are donating to and where that money is going.
Yes. So when you first came in though here, like did you immediately see some red flags that you're like,
Yeah. Again, one of the first was the they had like a chart where they would mark off where dogs that had been walked, or in the system, sometimes a dog shouldn't be walked. Maybe it could be a medical reason, they just had a surgery or something like that. Yeah. And I would see there were dogs that were marked as do not walk, and then no one ever reviewed it. Their surgery was 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so that was never lifted, and no one asked. And a lot of staff didn't even have access to the system. So, I mean, there's just, the communication was so poor. But again, when leadership doesn't even really generally care about the animals, that's setting the tone, right?
Right.
And then you have the people that are making $14, $15 an hour that are just trying to do the right thing and keep their job. Yeah. The organization was also severely understaffed, so they didn't even have enough people to be taking care of these animals. Now, the nice thing was we built the volunteer program. Those were people that could come in and get the dogs out of the kennels, right? Yeah. So that was good. And that's also a positive thing because you want to expose animals to new people and different people and, learn as much as you can about them so that you can provide that information to potential adopters. But yeah, this organization, it was very apparent very early on. I could see when they were gearing up or identify what dogs they wanted to euthanize or cats they wanted to euthanize next. They would use the word aggressive a lot, which aggression has a very specific definition, and there are different types of aggression, but it was used as a blanket statement, even for fearful dogs. There's a difference between a dog that's just fearful versus aggressive, right? And like sometimes they can be connected, but you can't use that as a term just to describe any dog that isn't behaving like a happy, normal dog in a house, So that term was grossly misused and overutilized. And then that could even just be the excuse for euthanizing them. Aggressive. Well, if you're euthanizing an animal, you better have very clear documentation of the behavioral concerns or what's happened to build a case for that. And that's one thing that wasn't happening. Animals would just disappear, and I mean, it was real fishy. Things were just not adding up, Well,
because you got to figure you have, all like X amount of dogs pretty much all living in the same room, right? And they're their personalities are going to conflict. Some dogs aren't great with other dogs. Some dogs are good with some dogs and not other dogs. Like you can't blanket state them as aggressive is in that atmosphere, because it's like you said, it's stressful for them. Like there's no, they can't relax.
There's a distinct difference too. Like, again, the organization has progressed a lot, but back then they would judge the animals by their kennel behavior. Well, if you had a dog that's lived 7 years in a home where they get to lay on the couch and go for walks every day, and now you've contained them to a kennel, I would act pretty crazy too. But barking and things like kennel behavior very often is not any indication of what a dog is going to act like outside of the kennel, right? I mean, but that is how they were judged.
Oh, so sad.
And like, what can people do to help or to? I mean, it's tough because we were talking about this before we started. Like I had 2 dogs. My one dog, she was 14 and a half, and she passed back in the end of February. And so now my family is like, we need a second dog. The other dog's depressed without a playmate, which in fairness, I think she is. Yeah. But when we go and we look to adopt, there's so many dogs that are like, not safe with other dogs. Don't bring around kids. And I have 3 kids. And so and their friends are here all the time. And so it's just so like, you just get a little bit nervous. And the dog that we have, we also adopted her. So she's can be a little bit skittish around other dogs. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you kind of don't know how to proceed. And I think that's why some people then defer, like, oh, I'm just going to go to a breeder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to poo-poo people that go to breeders as long as they are ethical breeders, right? Because there's a distinct difference. However, I will also say that for people that have a preference for certain breeds, we see everything come through rescue. So if you're a little patient, you could get your French Bulldog, or we see a lot of German Shepherds, unfortunately, but or your Rottweiler or your Pinscher, or whatever, your Boxer. However, I personally think that mutts are the best dogs. Their temperament, they tend to live longer, and they're just less prone to a lot of the issues that
less health issues.
Yeah, exactly. However, it is very understandable that some people do have concerns. Again, like if they having kids or if you have another dog. So in those instances, because it is hard to gauge sometimes at a shelter, but that's where you might want to look into adopting a dog that's in a foster home, because their foster parent will have a good sense of what they're like in a home, if they get along with other dogs, how they are with kids. Again, because they have already been exposed or living in more of a realistic environment that they will, because it's funny, at the shelter, there's even dogs that will be marked as not friendly with other dogs, and then they get adopted and it's totally different, so there's just so many, I want to say false factors, but it's kind of a false environment in that it's not real. It's kind of like being in jail, so a lot of people are going to puff out their chest and not know who they can trust in jail. So why wouldn't dogs be doing that at the shelter, right? But also going slow. I think anytime even if you do get a dog from a breeder, but especially dogs that come from a shelter, or even if they're rehomed, I always tell people, go super slow. You give them time to decompress, right? It's stressful to come from one environment to another, new people, new dogs. Give them time to be in a quiet room by themselves for a couple hours every day. You don't have to introduce them right away to your resident dog. You could take them for walks together, but when they're home, keep them separate. Actually, it's ideal to keep them separate for 1 to maybe even 2 weeks till you introduce them face to face, but that it allows them to get used to the idea of another animal in the house. And then it's not so exciting when they finally meet. They've adjusted. But the slower you go, the better the chances of it sticking and there being, a strong fit and that animal staying in your home.
Yeah. I have a question, and I'm just curious because I've never really understood how this works. Because you've mentioned fostering. Now, does it typically work that there's like a fostering program connected with the shelter program, or are they 2 separate entities? Like, or you have dogs, and you're like, okay, this, like, people come in, I'm like, okay, I might not be ready to adopt, but I can foster. Like, how does it work?
So Both. So there are what we call animal rescue organizations. So these are different from shelters in that most of the time they don't have a physical location. It is a foster-based organization, has people, like me, whomever, volunteers that will foster the animals in their home. So all of their adoptable animals are usually in a foster home. And then you have shelters, which are, have a physical location. They have animals there. And actually, a lot of shelters do have foster programs. I believe the shelter that I was working for is working in that direction, but they did not. They had not had a foster program. And the best part about a foster program is you're preventing animals from having to be in that stressful shelter environment, and it makes space for other animals that do have to come in. But the idea behind fostering is that you provide a home and, the love and care, maybe a little bit of training if they need it, until they are adopted. Ideally, you shouldn't have to incur any costs yourself. The rescue would pay for any medical expenses, provide you with food and supplies. I mean, if you want to buy stuff for them, you can, but the idea is that you're not incurring any costs, but rather you are just opening your heart and your home to help find this animal, the best fit.
And I'm sure many of the people who foster end up adopting their foster dog. I would. I mean, I feel like, all right, you're like, we like you, been around for a while. Let's just keep you. Like
yes. My first foster, my next door neighbors adopted him. My second one, we call it a foster fail, which sounds negative, but it's not. It just means you keep your foster. My parents have one. A friend from work has one. I mean, you kind of target your immediate network first, Yeah. But it's funny too. I've, my passion for animals has been a great thing for my career as well, because it's such a genuine passion and it's a great way to connect with people. I mentioned Phil Adoptables, the other organization that I am on the board for. This year we're having our 7th annual charity golf outing. So I started that back in 2019. And I have successfully turned it into, I'd say it's about like 80% insurance folks.
Excellent.
But everyone looks forward to it. It's such a fun event. We have puppies. It's a beautiful course. It's good people. And again, it's just the cool part is it's genuine because it's my true passion. And so to be able to combine, both of those things is just awesome.
Yeah.
So my husband works for one of the local hospital systems, and once a month, the SPCA from up here will go to the hospital with a bunch of their dogs to see if they could get the people on staff at the hospital to adopt. And he texts me every time it happens. He's like, be ready for when I come home. He never gets he's a physician. So it's like, it's really hard for him to break out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he missed it each time this summer. And I'm secretly sort of happy because I don't want him to pick up. Yeah. Because
he's prepping you for when it happens, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. He will be the one to come home randomly with the dog one day.
That's awesome. There's a shelter right down the street from me, and they have some really great programs. At least I think they're really great programs. They have one that it's like kids go in and they just read books to the dogs and the cats, which I think is so sweet. And it's just like it's a good way to like get them. The pets get more interaction. The kids, like, especially my kid, who we don't have any dogs because I have one kid that's scared. So she gets her fur, her fur time in.
That is cool. Yeah, there's a lot of, and like I said, this organization that I was working for, they've started to incorporate a lot of these things, which is great. But it's an organization that serves the community, so they should be engaging the community. They should be getting the community involved. And like I said, I think they really are working on rebuilding that trust and creating the engagement that didn't previously exist. So, yeah.
Well, I love that you are so passionate about this because it just rounds you out, right? Like you have, professional Allie, and then you have professional Allie part 2.
Yeah. I jokingly say I feel like I lived a whole other life, for a year. I do feel like a more rounded person. I feel like I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I can kind of just rise up and be who I need to be when given the situation or circumstances that you need to face, I guess.
Right.
It's I wouldn't change a thing. Like I said, I mean, it was a challenge, but I wouldn't change a thing.
So do you go back now and like check in, or are you kind of
No,
trying to put it? Yeah.
It was pretty traumatic. I keep in
Yeah.
touch with some folks that still like volunteer there. I thought that maybe I would like to go back as a volunteer, but I realized it was probably best for me to kind of cut ties, at least for now. It really,
Yeah.
I felt the more connected I stayed, it kind of just kept ripping open the wounds, and I just needed to let myself heal.
Yeah.
So, but I get my fill through Philadoptables. We do
Mhm.
fundraising for like local rescue groups. So things like I said, things like the golf outing and other events. We help a lot of homeless animals and rescues in and around the greater Philadelphia area. So.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because it made me think about this. A lot of the animals that you were seeing in the shelter, was it a mix of how they ended up there? Because I think about this all the time. Like I know everyone has circumstances, and sometimes you have a pet and it no longer fits with your family, or there's a move or something. But that always breaks my heart too, because I'm like, well, you committed to the pet too. So I don't want to take a hard line again, but it does hurt my. I don't like it. But what were you seeing?
Yes. Oh, so and that's a really great question. It's a little bit of everything. So there are scenarios where you can't blame or criticize someone. There's people that lose their homes, right?
Yeah.
There's sometimes an elderly family member passes away, and the
Yeah.
family does not have the ability to care for their pet. A lot of animals come in as strays.
Yeah.
So a stray meaning that basically someone brought them in other than the owner. So sometimes the strays are claimed. Their owners will come and get them. Sometimes people lie and say it's a stray when it really is their animal. Some people just give up. Some people feel inconvenienced. Some people get a dog and, they don't give them that proper time to decompress or adjust to a new environment. So they make a decision very early on that it's not a fit. I do wish that before people adopted animals that they took the time to learn, there's a process, like there's actually something called the 3-3-3 rule. Like, it's 3 days for them to kind of, accept they're in a new environment, 3 weeks until they kind of start to get a routine. And then, it could take up to 3 months for some animals, even longer, for them to actually fully decompress and adapt. I mean, it takes time. And like you said before, they can't speak. So we kind of fill in the gaps, and there's just some people that just aren't willing to be patient or put in the work.
It's hard. I mean, because I had one dog that I got before I had kids, and I was just on my own and had no other responsibilities. And then the second one I got, and it was like we adopted our Memorial Day weekend. We had a dance recital the next day. I hadn't slept the entire night. I'm just like, nope, she's going back. She's going back. She wants her. My husband's like, he's like, give it 3 weeks. All right. Like if after 3 weeks you still can't do it, we'll have a conversation. And then of course, after 3 weeks, everything is fine. But it's like those first couple of weeks, you're not sleeping. You're just not sure what's going on, and you're irritable. It's kind of like having a newborn.
Yes. Well, animals, especially dogs, they thrive with routine, so, a new animal, you don't have a routine yet. Right. But once you get that down and they know what to expect, I mean, it's not unlike humans, right? They're a lot more comfortable and they do better when they have a predictable routine.
And I work from home. So I just remember the first day, like the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and I'm like, and now she's here and I'm here and I don't get a break from her. Oh my God. Because my other dog, we crate trained her, and you put it.
Crates, I always tell people too, crates are not bad. There's some people that are like, oh, that's cool. No, crates are good. They're safe. Again, it's quiet. You can put them in another room, let them decompress. But no, crates are a good thing.
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, I just have another question. I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but there are a lot of rescues, particularly I've been seeing in Pennsylvania, who get the dogs from the mills that don't sell, and then they adopt them out. I mean, what do you think that's kind of like giving the mills an easy out for when they?
That's another good question. So I think as long as they are not making a financial transaction, I'm okay with it. So my problem would be if they were giving them money, because then they are just they're part of the system, right? If they're exchanging money. it stinks, but unfortunately, a lot of these mills, the parents or the puppies that don't sell, they will shoot them.
Yeah.
And that's just the truth. These are not living beings to them.
Yeah.
It's just money makers. So there are rescues that will take those dogs. But again, as I'm okay with it as long as they don't have a financial transaction.
And especially though, I know the one that, because I'm pretty sure that's what happened with the dog that we adopted. She was 5 months old, but she's a doodle, so she was likely coming from a mill. And my daughter's allergic, so we can't have a shedding dog.
Yeah.
So it kind of puts us in a little bit of in a tough spot.
Yeah.
But in return, the shelter asks for more money because it's a puppy, and they call these dogs like I forget what they call them, like
benefactor dogs.
Benefactor dog, yeah. So I mean, it's kind of nice that then they're getting a little bit more money to support the other dogs in the shelter.
Yes, definitely, because those are the kind of dogs where they get tons of applications.
Oh yeah, you need to be like your firstborn child or your left arm or something to get
right.
for rescue.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Allie, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience. Before we close up, I have one last question to ask you. But knowing what you know now and all the experiences you've had, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, that's a great question. Don't be afraid to take risks.
Mm-hmm.
Trust your gut.
Yeah.
That right there is trust your gut. That's one of the things I learned, that one of the biggest lessons I think I learned during my experience with the SPCA too.
Yeah.
Rarely does that lead us wrong. They call it your second brain. When you have a feeling about something, or you just know something is wrong, a lot of times we try to convince ourselves out of it, but you got to listen to that. And the same could go for something positive, but I think, trust your gut and don't be afraid to take risks, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And I'm so glad you followed it, whether or not you knew you were following it. It was innate in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Allie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure sitting down and chatting with you. I love your background so much, though, too. I like, Jen, I think you need to buy this and put it in Alice's room.
I actually have 3 of these. You can get all kinds of patterns. So,
do they have horses? Because Alice loves horses.
Oh my gosh, they have everything. Whatever your interest is.
You're gonna have to tell me where you got it.
I will. I will. Or do you want me to share it with everyone? Amazon, or it's called Wall 26. Is you can get it directly for Wall 26, their website, or Amazon. I think the same price. They come in like 2-foot strips. And piece them together.
And now you are a Wall 26 influencer.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Right.
Of course, for all our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform as well as YouTube. And thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.